Can science predict who will win the Iron Throne? Data scientists at the University of Munich famously figured out that Jon Snow was not gone for good at the end of Season 5 after their model only gave him an 11% chance of dying. Assuming most characters need to be alive to claim the Iron Throne, can we use science to predict what will happen in Season 8? Two Australian researchers used a technique called survival analysis to try to do just that. They went back and watched the first 7 seasons of Game of Thrones and tracked how long each character survived. Of the 330 characters included, over half were killed, with the shortest survival time being just 11 seconds of the show. To predict who is most likely to continue to survive, they put different groups in head-to-head matchups, such as men versus women and highborn versus lowborn. Every time a character died, they calculated the probability of survival for the rest of the group. They used this to understand which types of characters were most likely to survive in the show. For example, male characters have been killed off more frequently than female characters throughout the series.
All men must die, but we are not men.
This is mostly true for lowborns versus highborns too, but lately death has become more likely for highborns. Interestingly, treason might be a good survival tactic in Westeros. Those who switched allegiances survived better than those who stayed loyal to their house. The researchers also found that one of the worst things was to be a mediumly prominent character. They had 6 times the risk of death of minor characters, while major characters only died about twice as often as those with minor roles.
I will be your champion.
This could bode poorly for male, lowborn supporting characters, and could predict bright futures for female highborns. But we have to be careful in making the jump from seeing what happens on average in Westeros to trying to predict the fate of individual characters. This actually has real-world implications. It sounds morbid, but doctors want to be able to predict when someone will die in order to be able to provide care to terminally ill patients. One study tried to predict death in the next year among 10,000 heart patients using a so-called mortality calculator. While it correctly guessed the overall percentage of patients who would not survive, only 3% of the individual patients it predicted were the ones that actually died. Real-world scientists and Game of Thrones predictors have tried to get around this issue using machine learning. One data scientist used machine learning to assign a chance of death to each character in Game of Thrones and came up with these predictions. Daenerys was most likely to die, followed by the Lannister brothers. Bran, Cersei, and Jon were next, with the Stark sisters and Gendry being the most safe. You may have noticed that these results are slightly different from the other model. It makes sense that the Stark sisters got a low rating, but Daenerys is a highborn woman and still at a high risk of death. This could be explained by the models using different inputs. The machine learning model considered factors like age and whether the character had dead relatives, things that weren't used in the first survival model. Doesn't mean that it's better, but it is important to consider what goes into a model before looking at it. The predictions that come out will only be good as the information going in. If you think you can outpredict the data scientists, try out our Game of Thrones predictions contest. Weigh in on Season 8 events like who will win the Clegane Bowl, and of course, who will sit on the Iron Throne. The winner will get some sweet Game of Thrones merch and eternal glory. All you have to do is subscribe and fill out your predictions in the link below. Finally, can scientists use machine learning to predict when you will die? Some machine learning algorithms are pretty good at predicting individual deaths in hospital patients, but they would likely fail in the completely different context of people who are still healthy. And that's something that's important to remember. These models assume that things will continue to happen as they've been happening already, which we can't really rely on in something as full of plot twists as Game of Thrones or real life. After all,
a minute, an hour, a month. Death is certain. The time is not.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to enter the predictions contest by subscribing and filling out the link below. Also, if you want to know more about the science of Westeros, check out the book The Science of Game of Thrones by Helen Keane. A link to the book, as well as to the studies mentioned in this video, are in the description below.